One. Welcome, everyone. I'm Stacy Weaver, Executive Director of San Diego American Heart Association. I'm so excited to have you join us today for this engaging panel discussion on something we deeply believe at the AHA, and I know VEBA does too, the need to inspire a culture of a whole person employee wellness. In just a few minutes, we will hear from our panelists on this topic. But before that, I wanted to take a moment to highlight the work of the American Heart Association and the Go Red for Women movement, of which VEBA is our cause sponsor and the biggest supporter. More than 17 years ago, the AHA launched Go Red for Women to bring awareness that heart disease is the #1 killer of women, and that women are often misdiagnosed and unaware of their lifestyle changes that they can make to help prevent heart disease. We have made great strides in raising awareness, educating women, and providing programs and resources to those who need it most. But we must continue to do more as heart disease continues to claim the lives of 1 in 3 women. That's why we are so grateful for those who have come alongside us, like the VEBA Resource Center and our volunteer leaders in supporting the work of the American Heart Association as we work to break down barriers to health equity right here in San Diego. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator this afternoon, Laura Josh, with our VEBA Resource Center. Laura?
Great. Thank you, Stacy. I'm thrilled to be with everyone today and discuss this important topic. First, start off with California Schools VEBA. We're a nonprofit healthcare trust that delivers high quality, affordable, and accessible healthcare for our public sector employers in San Diego. The most important asset we see for these employers is their employees, which makes the focus on the social, emotional, and physical health really a critical leadership issue. At VEBA, we focus on closing the gaps in the existing health and well-being system to ensure all of our members have access to equitable and high-quality care. And we did that through the launch of our VEBA Resource Center in 2019 to connect members with resources that can aid in improving their mental, emotional, physical, and social health. In addition, I've had the pleasure of actually being a member of the executive leadership team for the Go Red for Women movement for the last 2 years. I've met really some amazing women and heard some compelling and inspiring stories of the work that we do. And I think really seeing how that is inspiring a healthier community for all of us. So with that, what I'd like to introduce our panelists today before we dive into the topic. We've had a few questions submitted beforehand, so hopefully we'll have some time to jump on those at the end. So first, I would like to introduce Superintendent Cindy Martin of San Diego Unified School District, who is also very special to VEBA as our management chair of California Schools VEBA. Cindy is a fierce champion of employee wellness and heart health, having served twice actually as the past chair of the San Diego Go Red for Women movement. Superintendent Martin leads 16,000 employees and 130,000 students with a singular focus on student success. She believes that there are no excuses when it comes to providing children with the very best conditions that will enable them to become confident and successful learners who can achieve their dreams. Our next panelist is Police Chief David Nislight. Chief Nislight has been with the San Diego Police Force since 1988, and in 2018 was appointed the 35th police chief for the city of San Diego, which is the 8th largest police force in the nation. When he isn't leading our police force, Chief Nislight is incredibly active as both a runner, cyclist, and golfer himself. Next up is Julie Moran, a recently named marketplace leader for Deloitte Consulting for San Diego. Julie is also a member of the AHA Board of Directors and Go Red for Women leadership team. She's incredibly passionate about health and wellness and really advocating for women in leadership. We also have Vicki Mueller-Burke, who's the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Qualcomm. Vicki was appointed Qualcomm's first diversity officer in 2016 and also sees Qualcomm employee relations team. In this role, she ensures Qualcomm is dedicated to creating and sustaining a positive work environment by helping to resolve work-related challenges. And last but definitely not least, we have Chris Kalitz, Chris is our Healthy Living Lead for the American Heart Association, where he oversees the creation of content about well-being and brain health. Previously, he was the American Heart Association's director for the Center for Workplace Health and also serves as the science advisor to the American Heart Association's CEO Roundtable, which is 46 of the CEOs of the nation's largest companies who are dedicated to creating healthy companies and healthy communities. This is a very exciting and impressive lineup today. I'm in our prep was really excited hearing about what everyone's doing, and I am very excited to share it. So we'll start with a round robin in discussions, in starting with saying, as leaders of our organizations, employee well-being goes beyond just what we think of in our traditional benefits package, like our health plan or our EAP. So I'd like each of you to take a couple minutes to talk about what does well-being mean specifically in your organizations, and how do you create a culture that helps prioritize employee well-being? And I will call on you as you appear on my screen. So Vicki, you're up first.
Thanks, Laura, and hello, everyone. I can answer the question pretty easily. Our well-being mission for Qualcomm is really to make sure that we provide our employees and their families with a really holistic end-to-end well-being program. And what we really want to try to do is to make sure that they're just able to live their best, most productive life. And that is how they can be the best employees for us, and also, for them to feel that support. Our well-being pillars are around four things: health, which is our physical well-being; self, which is our mental and emotional well-being; wealth, and we focus on making sure our employees have financial well-being, and community, so kind of the social well-being. So those are the pillars of our program, and we have a variety, which we'll go into later, of incentives to make sure they engage, that they're educated, and they take part in all those programs. So I've got more details on some of that later, but that's where we'll start.
Perfect. Thank you. Chief Nisley, you're up next.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Our department's had a wellness unit. We have a very robust wellness unit. So we're very fortunate to have actually highly trained, skilled folks that are actually sworn members of our police department that really kind of look after the whole police department, if you would. It really starts at the recruit level. When they graduate, we have a family day where they bring in their mom and dads, their significant others, siblings, and we take them through the whole kind of what to expect supporting somebody in law enforcement, and red flags that you need to be pushed forward and report, because we also have a very robust psychological service that the family can also use free of charge. And then we obviously have a chaplain program. So those kind of the full wraparound for us, and really looking at, and obviously in 2020, that's become even more important, as just the difficulty of this profession is weighing very heavy on our folks. And so I think one of the keys to wellness is admitting that it's been a very tough year, and acknowledging that, and giving people the avenue to discuss and talk and vent of what is going on, what they're seeing going on with the profession. Obviously what happened with George Floyd is completely, it's not what should happen ever in this profession. And having those conversations with our folks, and to include their families, and understanding the family pressures that are going on, and the difficulty then of COVID also, and then what that does to our profession, and how that's kind of divided the country, and how that pertains to us really trying to enforce the public health order. Again, just having all those avenues open for our officers to do, and then making certain that we are practicing what we preach from the top down, to let people know that these services are there for them to use, and that it's actually a sign of strength to use them. It's not a weakness by using them. And that's a cultural shift for law enforcement that we've really tried to stress over the last probably 10 years, since we've actually had wellness longer than that, but really trying to understand that culture. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say you need help. And that starts all the way from the recruit all the way up to the chief.
That's a really nice segue into also Superintendent Martin, I know, has a very similar philosophy. So Cindy, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Laura. We absolutely do. What we say very often is what the strong do to rise is they ask for help. And an employee wellness program begins with not just the employees, it's the students, their families, the whole community. But we begin with the self. We begin with the employees and having a district-wide systemic approach to this. As Chief Nisley just said, it's got to begin with each individual family and how to meet people where they are on their journey towards wellness takes a strategic effort, and it really does begin. I don't often think, it starts at the top and top down. Sometimes top down things don't always work very well because they create, they don't allow creativity and innovation to happen. But when it comes to employee well-being, you've got to have the leadership be wholeheartedly, first of all, a model for it, but also encouraging it. And so we have school teams at each school site and in every department, wellness leads that implement the district-wide employee well-being policy. And it's our partnership with VEBA. VEBA, Laura just said at the beginning, the work that we do with VEBA as being able to have the virtual resource center. We decided that employee well-being is a daily activity. It's not something where, we have great health benefits and you can go to the doctor when something's broken or something's wrong, but we want to be proactive. We want to have interventions and supports before something happens. And so at the VEBA Resource Center, we built it. First was in person. We built this VEBA Resource Center so folks could go and have cooking classes and meditation classes and sound therapy, and you can meet a wellness navigator, put you on your wellness journey. And then when COVID-19 happened, we pivoted the whole thing to virtual. And now we're able to have our employees get support. We had 38,000 visits just last year to the VEBA Resource Center. And we're out promoting this. So it's a district-wide approach. And it comes from leadership, it comes from modeling it, but it also comes with every employee understanding that their employer supports their well-being and that we're here looking out for each other. And I'll echo also what my colleagues have said. You can't underestimate the stress that all of our employees have been under and what it's like to pivot the entire teaching profession to an online environment and learn new skills and learn how to serve the needs of our students in incredibly challenging situations. So how are we showing up for our employees? How are we showing up for each other? And how are we looking for signs when somebody needs help and making it okay to ask for help and not pretending like everything's okay when it's not. At the end of the day, we earned with the American Heart Association our partnership there, and the reason why I agreed to chair the Go Red for Women campaign is women's heart health has been incredibly important to me. And I've seen my own family be affected by heart health, and my husband having a heart attack and a stroke, and I recently lost him after 10 years of surviving after his stroke. I understand what it means for a family to have issues around health that they need to deal with. And I want to be about education. I was proud when our district achieved the gold standard for workplace health, and we're able to set the bar very high to show what it actually looks like in practice.
Thank you. Julie, would you like to talk a little bit about what Deloitte's doing with their employees?
Absolutely. So the well-being of our people is, especially important because our products are the people that are the consultants that are out there helping our clients. And when we went into the immediate and almost overnight conundrum of everybody's going to be working from home, I think this was first and foremost is how is the health and well-being of our employees going to impact our product and the quality of what we can deliver for our clients, and how do we protect our employees? So we had taken a process about 5 years ago and created a chief well-being officer. We have a spectacular woman that runs that for all of Deloitte in the United States. And she really had a number of pillars that she had put in place. Again, we had a couple year runway on this before this hit. So we were able to take those and kind of amplify them. I love hearing it's okay to ask for help. And I think that that's where we really were very adamant that this had to be from the top down. And we were doing, town hall calls with 100,000 employees where our CEOs were basically being very transparent and in their home offices and explaining how, some of them have young kids at home and they can't be on the parenting and schooling and Zoom work call all day long. It's just, that kind of pace is not sustainable. So I think we really took the tactic that our leaders had to set an example. We needed to be very transparent about our own struggles that we had in our own households. We needed to do things for the mental health of our employees. And that's where some of the foundation of our program, we really amplified some of those. And taking it down to an individual team level where you could really say, look, we're going to do no Zoom call Fridays and get our client and project teams to all sign up for that so that we could give some reprieve to people. Again, I think being very self-protective of your recovery strategies. And what are those? Does that mean you go for a walk, or on that conference call, you put your headset in and you walk around the block and you're not sitting there at your computer the whole time? We did do some monetary. We decided just to do a one-time award to everybody to say, make your workspace more comfortable, get a stand-up desk, do a new headset. We don't even want it to run through the expense thing. We are just going to pay you a monetary stipend to help you make your workspace more comfortable. We also did some charge codes to folks if you had elderly parents and children where you have a childcare challenge and schooling challenge, and you could charge to your time to those codes and it wouldn't count against your utilization and your individual performance metrics if you needed that to cover yourself during this time period. So we really looked at a lot of things, physical, mental, and again, amplifying those pillars that we had in place and really trying to push that down to a lower level so that our managers and our teams could try to do those things internally and really lead by example and set a good example and be very open and transparent about our own personal struggles, because we felt like that was something that was important to our culture, that all of our employees knew how important they were, how important their help was, and what we were doing to try to help improve that in a very challenging time. Thanks, Laura.
I love just hearing the position of the leadership and all of you really understanding and taking that position, because I think it creates a safe space for employees to also model and be open and ask for help. So lastly, I'd like Chris, I know Chris has perspectives both from the AHA perspective as well as what you see overall in the industry and best practices.
Thanks, Laura. Well, I've heard most of the best practices covered by our other speakers, so I'll just add to it to say that I'm not responsible for health and well-being formally internally at AHA, but I work very closely with our HR leaders. I'm more responsible for our sort of external and community-based programming. What I would say is, and what I've heard echoed on by the other speakers, is that the research actually shows that when it comes to health and well-being, leadership support that is visible and is regularly modeled is very closely associated with employee well-being and the likelihood of employees adopting healthy behaviors. So the grass tops are definitely needed in this conversation. And leaders play a very important role in raising awareness around mental health and well-being, and also reducing stigma in the workplace. So we did a survey with the CEO Roundtable about 2 years ago, and it was a nationally representative sample of employees. And of the employees who said that they had been diagnosed with a mental health condition, which was actually much higher than the national average, and we're seeing much higher levels of mental distress in the US population as a result of COVID, obviously. But in this sample about 2 years ago, 63% of employees said that they would not feel comfortable discussing a mental health diagnosis with a supervisor. So engaging leaders and supervisors in this conversation and doing everything that we can to reduce stigma through things like mental health training for supervisors and we'll talk about that a little bit later, is really important. And then I think it's also true what Superintendent Martin said about engaging, the grassroots. In this case, it's our employees. We do that through a variety of different ways. And primarily the objective there is to make sure that employees are feeling engaged and connected to their internal communities, but also to their external communities. And we can talk about some specific strategies to do that. I think at the end of the day, for us, we have a vision of all people in their communities experiencing optimal mental health and well-being. And that definitely requires a village, and it requires, identifying what those evidence-based strategies are, and also allowing for innovation from the ground, from the grassroots, and to implement that in a comprehensive way. And hopefully I'll be able to say a little bit more about that in terms of what we're doing at AHA, but definitely making sure that employees feel safe at work, feel comfortable to raise their mental health concerns, and then to have leadership support for that is essential.
All right, thank you, Chris. I love what you said about optimal mental health and well-being, because we always look at VEBA about what a personal journey your mental health and well-being is, and that it's not to get everyone to the same state, but it's to get whatever is optimal for them in their own needs and their own lifestyles. And I think this actually really goes well into our next question with Vicki, is as a leader, when you think about, we build, robust programs and things, but sometimes it can be difficult, or there can be, like Chris was saying, maybe stigma attached with utilizing them. How do you, in your populations, create an environment where employees feel comfortable accessing the resources, particularly when you have a very diverse population?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. One, we just communicate, make sure people actually know what all the benefits are. There's constant change and new benefits. And so one is just that communication and training. We do newsletters. We get executives to talk about, changes and additional benefits. We're in the US, we actually incentivize employees by basically paying money into their HSA fund to do things like download a mental wellness app, to go through, financial wellness training. When they complete that, Qualcomm will put some additional money into their HSA. So there's some financial reward and financial gain by just getting educated. But I think what Chris and others said, it's the stigma in a lot of cases too, of actually taking the benefits that are available, and we've seen that just really get magnified in this COVID time, where we've got family time off, and we gave people COVID time off. Just tell us that we'll continue to pay you, but just tell us that you need to take some time off. And it's so hard in a very competitive corporate environment for people to actually raise their hand and admit that they need something. Are they letting down their coworkers? How will their boss, view them? We were amazed at how well we've executed virtually through COVID. And there's a lot of teamwork. And so even just stepping back and taking some time, either for yourself or as a caregiver for your family, there's this guilt about just, letting your team down or putting more work on others. So we've really just tried to talk about that. And I think we've also just seen the stigma of really the mental wellness and mental health it's been lifted. We're talking about this more than ever. Our executives are talking about it. And we've seen, an increase in cases where employees will raise their hand and say, look, I'm struggling. I'm drinking more than I ever have. I'm lonely. We have young employees who don't have families and they're very isolated. So we've just tried to make it okay for people to talk about it and point them towards resources. And we've got a couple other programs. And again, I'll let other folks chime in that we've initiated this year.
Yeah, the travel bans, and particularly if you're over here alone without family, can be very, very isolating, even more so than it ever is.
Absolutely.
I think that segues nicely into thinking about, this year's been, I think, difficult for everyone, but Chief, you touched on it a little bit in your opening comments. Can you talk about how you've been able to help your team really manage the stress and anxiety of this year? And then also, personally demonstrate how you've been able to manage your stress and overcome.
Yeah, it's 2020 has been very difficult. We literally went from being heroes as it pertains to the public health order to, end of May, what happened in Minnesota, going to absolute villains. And that was very difficult. The civil unrest, some of the things that were being said to our officers. What I would do and what our chaplains would do is walk the lines of these protests with our officers and just talk to them and let them know that, hey, they're really not yelling at you. They don't know you as the person they're yelling at the badge. And, allowing them to vent, but it was difficult. Much like Vicki, we've seen an uptick in alcohol use like everybody else. Our officers are feeling the stress of not feeling supported by the community, not feeling supported by their elected officials. The constant call for defunding and reform, we're still dealing with it, really starts to make our officers question, what is law enforcement going to look like? And, they're out there risking their lives day in, day out, and they don't know if they get into a position where they have to use kind of force, whether they will be supported by their elected officials. So what we do is we just have conversations, much like Vicki. We have a very robust wellness program, and they're out and about. In fact, they were out meeting with every single captain today at a meeting this morning at 9:30, along with our head psychologist. And it's just that repetitive, making certain everybody knows they're there, making certain those resources are being utilized to their fullest extent. And then, with the alcohol and different things, we're lucky. We have officers that have had lived experience that are willing to now come back forward and say, hey, here's what happened to me. Here was the traps that I fell into, and don't fall in these traps. Get yourself help before you possibly ruin your life, ruin your career. And I think that's been huge. The chaplains, and as far as for me, I've been very, very fortunate, obviously, as the chief of police. It's very difficult right now. Everything is coming at you full steam ahead, 7/24. I think during the civil unrest, I think I worked 28 days straight, no time off. And, obviously I have family, I have kids. I also have a son on this police department that is, saying, Dad, what is going on? So it's difficult, but like I said, I was lucky. I was adopted by one of our chaplains who demands that I have a weekly meeting with him, just to kind of do a balance and see where I'm at and see what's going on. And it's just my ability to have confidential conversations with the chaplain, whose name is Chuck. He's a great man. Keeps me balanced, keeps me focused. And then again, it's about modeling. It's about modeling that, it's okay to talk. And I tell people I talk with the chaplain weekly, and then the other part is, the importance of time off and trying to decompress. More difficult right now. It's hard to go anywhere, but I do stress that our officers get time away. It's difficult because, since May, this police department has monitored and facilitated well over 400 protests. And so, that takes a lot of staff. And so we can't let a lot of people off. And that's been difficult because our cops are exhausted right now. And that's adding to it. So it's that competitive, repetitive, just talking to folks and trying to get people downtime a little bit and taking care of folks and practicing what you preach.
I think we often talk about it as leaders in terms of putting on your mask first, and being able to make sure you take care of yourself so you can take care of your employees. And I know I'm going to go to Superintendent Martin next, and because you've had, you know, in your population, some essential workers that were still on site having to, you know, maintain in person, others that are doing the transition to working from home. And with all of those moving pieces, how did you keep up morale and make sure people stay healthy, and then also take care of yourself as well? Oh, there.
That's what the mission. We're clear on the mission around public education is serving over 100,000 students. And when we made the announcement that schools were closing on March 13th, which is almost exactly a year ago, we knew that we needed to very quickly, completely pivot everything that we're doing so that we would have continuity of learning for our students and continuity of food and nutrition services as well, because so many of our students depend on schools for food and nutrition and schools for their own well-being. And so in a matter of days, we were able to set up our food distribution centers. We've distributed over 10 million meals at this point. We're one of the largest food relief efforts in the region. And we had to figure out how to get all of our students, many of whom are low income, foster youth, homeless youth, living in shelters. How do we get a computer to them? How do we get internet connectivity to them so they can get online learning? So a lot of it is that purpose-driven work. Like, we know what our mission is. I often say this pandemic doesn't change who we are and what we believe in, but it changes how we go about doing our work. And so we distributed 80,000 Chromebook computers, got Wi-Fi hotspots to the homeless shelters, to families that didn't have them, so that they could have connectivity. And within a matter of weeks, we had 98% connectivity rate of all of our students connecting online. So a lot of that was just really sheer will of force about, we're not going to give up on students. It's not the students' fault that there's a global pandemic. So how do we figure out how students can get, we always say equity is each and every student gets what he or she needs when they need it in the way that they need it. And so, man, did we have to change how we go about doing it and get professional development to our teachers. And so I see wellness is connected to meaningful, purposeful work, and our teachers want nothing more than teach. That's what teachers love to do. And they just couldn't do it in the same way that they used to do it. And so giving them the access to tools of professional development to change their practices to do it in a different format is part of what wellness is. But we also had to have our site teams, site principals, department leads, knowing how to check in with each other. How do you know if someone's struggling when you don't see them every day? And teachers are just get up and they'll go and do their lessons. Things are challenging for them. I think Julie was talking about what you had to do in your organization, sure that, you know, families that were home, and if there were interruptions from the home, like, to make that okay. I've normalized, like, every Zoom call we're on, we begin with, how are you doing? And I'll say, like, Laura, I hope that your baby comes on the screen in a couple minutes, because I know you have a baby at home right now, and it's okay if a child gets on the screen. We are educators, or you have a dog or a pet, or I've had cats run across a computer screen because somebody's doing their Zoom from home, and then they're embarrassed, like, oh my God, I just did that in front of my boss. No, I think it's amazing if you do that. If I see your children show up in one of the, I mean, obviously, if it's a confidential meeting where you're not allowed to have someone here, but those are very few and far between. We have to realize this human part of it. So I've often said my two key phrases are, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. You've got to talk about what you're going through so you can manage it. And I've also talked about my practices when you say, what do I do to take care of myself so I can lead others to take care of each other and those that they serve. There's a saying, you grow through what you go through. And so we're all growing, we're all changing. We will forever be changed. I always say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. So many things that we've learned, and the level of resilience. We can talk about what's been lost, but I focus on what's been gained. And I've continued with my daily gratitude practices. When Chief talked about time off, I haven't had a day off since March 13th, when this thing began. because it's 24/7 for me, thinking, how do we get our kids what they need? How do we shift as the buildings are closed, but learning is open? Schools and hearts and minds are open, but doors are closed. So how do we do that? And that's what I'm constantly trying to do. And, you know, there was a lot of memes that came out at the beginning around parents at home realized how hard the teacher's job was. And like, wow, this is harder than I thought. And now it's exhausting, and people want help and they want support, and we've got to be there to support each other. So I've improved my practices. I always had a daily gratitude practice where I take a picture a day of something I think is beautiful. And I've built in more practices. I make sure to read for pleasure, at least 15 minutes a day, a poem or a book. I try to keep one book going because I know literacy matters. Literacy is key to success. And so I model that for my families and for our students. Music matters, eating well, exercising, and make sure I have an appropriate. But before, I can't wait for the time to change this weekend. I think Chief would be happy to know I don't walk in the dark anymore. I used to walk downtown in the dark. I live downtown. There was not happening that, so I had to start doing my exercises at home with like turning on things through the VEBA Resource Center. But I try to get 15,000 steps a day. So it's sort of mind-body connection of what am I doing for food, exercise? What am I doing for my nutrition? What am I doing for emotional and spiritual well-being? Connection to poetry, music, and then I journal write every day. And I also make sure at least once a week I write one personal handwritten thank you note that I put a stamp on and I put in the mail and I send to somebody, because what you put out in the world is what comes back. And so I want to put gratitude out in the world, and I'm always thinking of people I can say thank you to. Also, double down on making sure I know the birthdays of all of our staff members. So when it's somebody's birthday, I give myself a little message and I call them, or I send a little video message, I blow out a candle and I make a wish for them, that people know I'm thinking about them on their birthday, because the last thing I want to do is be on a Zoom call with a bunch of staff members and it's somebody's birthday and I didn't even know. So try to think about how do you make those personal connections for people.
I can tell you definitely don't have a little kid at home, because as a parent of a little kid, daylight savings time is like impending doom coming. And you think about trying to manage bedtimes. But, I think that's a great segue in terms of understanding how to build those connections and be present with your group. So Julie, can you talk a little bit about, now that everybody's connecting virtual, how do you stay connected with your groups? How do you see if people are struggling and keep taking care of their mental health from a virtual environment?
Admittedly, this is probably one of the hardest things that, as leaders and managers we've had to do, because we've been so used to a lot of FaceTime with our clients, FaceTime with our teams, FaceTime with the folks that we manage. And especially our younger, less experienced staff, they may not have a spouse or a significant other or children at home. They are very isolated, and they may be in a tiny apartment because they thought they are getting on an airplane on Monday and coming home on Friday. And so they spent relatively small amounts of time, or they have 5 roommates and they're all trying to do Zoom calls in a very tight space. So we really have had to take a step back and think about the individuals that we work with and what can we do for them. And it's kind of come down to just asking that question. Like Cindy said, when you start the call, we don't need to jump right into the agenda. Let's just kind of chat about how is everybody feeling? What's the new recipes that they've been, attempting to make? What are they doing for outside activities? Are they getting outside? And we had built a vital signs dashboard app that really was trying to get a feel for the lifestyle and the impacts on health and wellness for our employees, where we looked at hours on planes, miles flown, nights in hotels, how many days since you've taken PTO. So we actually pushed that to the managers and leaders on the projects and teams so that they could kind of see, do we have some red flags where somebody hasn't taken a day off in 111 days and they've got this amount of PTO racked up. So we tried to do some of that even before this hit. And I think, some of those metrics are still very important and we're using that. But what's really becoming critical is just asking the question and making time. And I know that I have set up, in December, I did it with about 45 to 60 of the folks that I work with on a regular basis. And I just asked for 20 minutes, no agenda. And it was interesting, the lower the levels were, the more nervous they were that I needed. They needed to prepare PowerPoint slides for me, and they were in trouble. And I'd get the email back, can I ask what this is about? Is there something that you need? And I'm like, no, I just want to talk to you. And I think they were blown away by somebody just setting up one-on-one time to just talk. And that has made such an impact. So we have really tried to encourage our leaders, our managers to, just ask, how are you? And have no agenda. And we don't need to have this crazy, virtual yoga. Those are fun. But what we really need to do is keep the personal connection going. It's a very important part of it. And I think we need to, share what our own little tricks of the day is now. Like, I think we got stuck in the working at home means working all the time, and there were no boundaries. So can you stop at whatever time it is? If it's 5 o'clock or 7:30, whatever your time is, you need to unplug and disconnect, and you need to be disciplined about it. And you need to go and spend family time. I've got one colleague that I know his calendar is always blocked for this 2-hour period because he eats dinner with his family every night. And he's like, I'm not doing a call. And he goes, I'll break the rule once, Monday through Thursday, but I won't let that rule get broken more than once during the week because my days are just so long. I kind of watch what times they're sending emails. And if I'm getting a lot of stuff at 1:30 in the morning, I will pick up the phone and call those folks and say, look, I know you have 3 children under the age of 7 at home. And that means that you're up super early and managing, school things that you're trying to get a 7-year-old to sit and focus on for 4 hours. And that's impossible for you to do that and do your job. Let's take some things off your plate. This is not going to be like this forever. And we know you're a very valuable employee. The client loves you. They trust you. You'll get your work done, and just make it okay for us to have different rules right now. And I think we have to lead by example. I have to say, I'm taking Friday afternoon off because I'm going to ride my horse and I'm not doing a call. I'm sorry. And when people say, wait, you can't do a conference call, and you tell them it's for a personal reason, they're like, it's almost become now that's, the bar that's being set is the expectation is we need to take time for ourselves, because you can make a 8-hour day turn into a 16-hour day really easily. And that isolation aspect, I think we have to be very conscious of, that our folks are very isolated in many cases, and we need to draw them into a conversation. We need to plan some things that it isn't just all work and there is no agenda, and we can just, have a conversation with people that's very real. We can talk about our own personal struggles. It's kind of like that Groundhog Day situation where I'm going to sit and do the same thing. So now I need to look at my calendar and figure out when I'm going to actually stand up and walk around and not just be sedentary. It's okay to, listen to an app for 15 minutes or just listen to 2 songs. I'll tell folks that, I've got a couple little things like that I do just when I realize I haven't moved around and I'm not doing anything to take care of myself, and these are the things I have to do. But I think one of the biggest impacts I feel like I personally have made is asking, how are you? And just giving them a chance to kind of talk. Because when we're not face to face, it's really hard to diagnose how our employees are doing and how they're feeling and how our teams are really, struggling on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes the answer is just take it one day at a time, but introduce one little trick, take 10 minutes out of your day to do something that's just for you.
I love that. I feel like that's working from home. I was just talking to a colleague yesterday about that's the piece that we all miss the most, right? Just seeing someone in the lunchroom and being able to be like, oh, how was your weekend? How are you doing? And you could really see and feed off of what they were saying. Well, Chris, they've been knocking it out of the park in terms of all the best practices. So what else do you have up your sleeve in terms of other things that you've seen, employers that have been doing good things, best practices that people should be considering as they support their workforces?
Sure, thank you. Again, a lot of the really good practices have already been mentioned. What I would say at a high level, the sort of pillars that stand out for me are 5 pillars. I've written down 5 pillars. 1 is raise awareness. 2 is combat stigma. 3 is offer comprehensive benefits. 4, give employees opportunities to connect. And 5, emphasize rest and recovery. And I think all of those aspects have already been very well covered by the other speakers. At AHA, I can give you a couple of examples of what we're doing across those 5 pillars. So, we've had monthly town halls with our CEO and COO since COVID hit almost a year ago. That was designed to address people's concerns about, when are we going to go back to work? Are we going to downsize? Is my job secure? What's the financial outlook of the business? And all of those topics. What do I need to know about COVID? What do I need to know about vaccines? And so we have monthly town halls where those issues are covered by our senior leadership. And I think that's been very helpful in addressing people's stress levels because of the uncertainty of the times that we're living in. In terms of reducing stigma, we've had our CEO and our other C-suite leadership talk about the importance of mental well-being at these town halls. We reinforce that with weekly HR communications, making it easy for people to understand what their benefits are. And that's a segue into, offering comprehensive benefits. We know that we can't reduce having a culture of health to benefits, but I think when it comes to mental well-being, having people, giving people the opportunity to have, access to relatively affordable and evidence-based treatment options is really important. And we know that, we struggle with narrow networks, lack of availability of therapists and other providers. So these are issues that employers tackle every day. At AHA, what we did is we already had a relationship with Teladoc. And what we did is we expanded that to include behavioral health. So we offer telebehavioral health to all of our employees free of charge. And I think that solves the access issue, especially during COVID. And we've heard some really good feedback from our employees. Even on open conference calls, people have volunteered that they've used the behavioral health services and that it's been very helpful to them. And I think we've certainly seen signs of employees being much more willing to disclose that they are struggling and that they are using the services that we offer them at AHA. And then in terms of giving employees an opportunities to connect, I know most large organizations have affinity groups or employee resource groups. We've really communicated to employees that these are available to them, that they should use them. It gives them an opportunity to connect. We have something like 10 ERGs at AHA at the moment. We've also given employees an opportunity to volunteer externally to support other nonprofits and causes that they feel passionate about, and to be able to take paid time off to do that. And then I think at the end of the day, and I've heard many speakers mention this, and I think it's really wonderful, is, before you get down to business, is to really check in with people on teams, whether it's on one-to-ones or on larger team meetings, to see how people are really doing it. And our senior leaders are really doing a fantastic job to lead the conversation with, how are you doing? And as Superintendent Martin said, my supervisor is really wonderful. She knows when everybody's birthdays are, what sort of professional anniversaries they are celebrating, and she calls that out on weekly team emails. And I think that makes people feel really appreciated and connected as a team. So those are just some of the things at AHA that we're doing to, make people feel more connected and less isolated. And I think at a very high level, I've really been heartened by the fact that people appear to feel much more comfortable to talk about their mental well-being, and that's exactly what we want folks to do, so that we can reduce the stigma attached to it, and really support employees on a day-to-day basis.
It's interesting, I think, when you look at very different roles, very different companies, very different industries, but very common human conditions, right, that we're all addressing in terms of isolation and stress and anxiety in those roles. One of the questions that came up as we go into the question section that I think would be great to see is, we've talked a lot about how things have changed now that we moved into COVID and how we implemented different issues. As we start to look towards the exit of COVID and whatever normal will look like post-COVID, what things do you think that you've implemented do you see sticking around that maybe we're seeing, hey, we put this in with COVID, but it seems like it would have some good legs post-COVID in terms of supporting our employees in the long term? I don't know who if you can go in any order.
I was going to say, well, that was one of my fondest wishes at the very beginning of this. I think we were 3 weeks into it when I called George McGregor from VEBA and said, this is for employee well-being. We built an entire virtual resource center to get our employees to start taking care of themselves. And because I know healthy employees are able to teach and do better with our children. And we were getting some usage of the VRC, but it wasn't as big as we wanted. I mean, it was growing, but not like we wanted. This is our chance. And if people use this time to learn what mindfulness is, learn cooking classes, just learn one new practice, it's going to stay with them. It's going to stay with them beyond this. That was my fondest wish, is that whatever practices, the hard parts we will leave behind, the things that have been hard during this year, but what is something new? What is something good that has come from this? And how will that stay with you forever? And I think every single person is going to be able to say what's been better on the balance of all the things that have been challenging. I don't want to ever say that it hasn't been hard, but what's worked. And there was a video, we did a little short movie contest where students made short movies about what COVID has been like. And there's one that just has stuck with me, where a little girl talked about everything that's been gained in balance of what's been lost and what she's learned and what her family has learned. And those are lessons that she's taking with her. And so I think that's my fondest wish, is that there's lots of things that we're going to take with us. And from a teacher's perspective, teachers have learned an incredible amount in terms of their practice. And all of the things that we've learned about virtual, even though we've announced a return to in-person learning moving towards April 12th as our goal for that, there are students and families that have actually been thriving in the virtual environment. It's an environment that has worked for them. And there are best-in-class teaching practices that are working for some teachers are really, really good at it. And some kids are doing really well with it. And there are families that have told us, we're not coming back to in-person learning for a long time, maybe ever. They want to wait till there's a vaccine for their student. There are plenty that want to come to in-person, but there are many families that are saying, something's working here for us and for our family. And those skills, those are things that are going to go long into the future. And we'll have to take the lessons that we've learned and apply them ongoing.
I think Vicki, did you?
I was gonna just mention a couple things. We were not a company that really embraced a lot of flexibility. We pretty much went to the office every day, and then and I don't think we ever would have been able to turn the switch and just, we would have studied flexibility and still thought it wouldn't work. And I don't think we're gonna necessarily stay like completely at home. But we will now forever know that people can and will be very productive, even if they're not in the office. And so that actually helps especially like our women and people that are caregivers, to just have some flexibility to either get their kids out the door, get home early to hit an appointment. That had a really big stigma to it because people just thought, well, you're not here, you're not working. So that is going to forever change our workplace and many, many workplaces. The second thing that we did this year in our focus to kind of destigmatize mental illness is we created a mental health ally program. And we saw with some research from Accenture that something like 61% of employees said they would not go to HR, they would not go use their employee assistant program. And the very first person that they were likely to reach out to was a peer. So we wanted to create a peer ally. We did training. They have a badge now, that a little logo that they can put in their signature of their email to kind of say, I'm a safe person, and I at least can, it's like first aid. It's mental wellness first aid. They'll know kind of where to, where to guide. Those are things that, they're never going to go away now. We're going to do that forever. And so, there have been a number of silver linings. I like to talk about the silver linings that have come out of that. And those are a couple of them.
I can quickly say ditto to what Vicki said. I think some of these things were in progress already, but we've invested significantly in the resources that we feel like our employees really needed to have access to. And I think we're going to continue to do that. I think the flex working approach too, our clients and our staff, there's kind of a bell curve of who wants to go back remote 5 days a week, who wants to stay at home 5 days a week. And then there's, a lot of them that are like, I could do this 2 or 3 days, kind of make it flexible. And I think that is something that we are going to see a lot more flexibility. We're going to think of our office as a place where you get your technology fixed, your laptop fixed. It's a place where we have events. It's a place where you do learning and collaboration with your teams. And it's a place where maybe you go to pick up supplies and mail and print and things like that. But it's not necessarily having to be a place where you go and physically sit. And instead, let's make it okay to have more flexibility. I think that's going to help us with our diversity, equity, inclusion goals as well. It's helping us with recruiting. It's helping us kind of, spread out the available options for where we find resources for our own employee base. So we're hopeful that a lot of this is positive going forward.
That's awesome.
Laura, I'll add one more thing. And I think this is, this is probably true across industries. It was kind of always a badge of honor to come to work sick, to kind of show like how hard a worker you are. And I think gone are the days that it's going to be acceptable for people to just come and be sick. And I think, kids in school, there's a lot of pressure. They always came. And I think our society is actually going to be healthier because people can actually go to school and stay at home. They can still work and stay at home. And, that's a big change for our society.
I think when hearing a big trend of acceptance, right? Whether it's children or dogs or work style or sick, that I know, just as we close out, from a personal perspective, I think the ability to not have to pretend like you don't have a life, you just have a job and not a life, that you can have both together is very refreshing and adds, when we talk about mental health support and mental health resources, I think that supports employees incredibly from that perspective. We have a few other questions, but we are at our last 2-minute time. So don't know if, and I didn't prep you this, so because we only have 2 minutes, what I think we could do is maybe go and do, what would be one word you would think as you think of 2021, and from this space, how you would describe your viewpoint going forward. I'll start with Cindy.
Growth.
Julie.
Resilience.
Vicki,
Flexibility.
Chief,
Opportunity.
and Chris.
Resilience.
I like all those. Well, thank you so much for such a fantastic conversation. I know we had a few other follow-up questions that we didn't get time to go through. So for those of you on the call that we didn't get time to address your questions, I apologize, but this was a fantastic discussion. And thank you everyone for your time. And I encourage everyone to continue to support the important work of the American Heart Association. And thank you to all the leaders for sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye.